Welcome to Command Control Power, the longest running Apple Consulting podcast. We have recently wrapped up our anonymous Apple Consulting survey that we sent out to our listeners and to our colleagues on Slack, and we got dozens of responses. Thank you all for participating. We're reviewing the results now, some really interesting feedback and kind of a breakdown on how different people position their services, different rates by market. And so there's a lot of interesting information in here. So if you want to listen to us discuss the results of our rates and plans survey, make sure to check us out on commandcontrolpower.com. Click on support to be taken right over to Patreon, where you can become a supporter on Patreon. You can subscribe right in your podcast feed. Also, if you participated in the rates survey, we will also be sending you some information by email if you included your email in case you're not a Patreon subscriber. But we hope you become a subscriber and a supporter on Patreon, and look forward to discussing that in an upcoming episode very soon. Command Control Power is brought to you commercial-free thanks to the support of our community. Our VIP supporters include Jason Detbarn of Adigy.com, Watchman Monitoring, and Adam Angst of Tidbits Content Network. Thanks very much for supporting the show. We have a special focus of this week's Command Control Power. We'd like to discuss Installomator, another alternative to package management. And Installomator was created by previous guest of the show, Armin Briegel of Scripting OS X or Scripting OS 10, that newsletter that we've referenced many a times. And we have Isaac Ordonez, Director of Technology at Mann Consulting. Welcome, Isaac.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Great to have you here. So Armin put us in touch with you as someone who manages a fair number of instances of Installomator for lots of your clients there at Mann Consulting. If you could just give us a quick elevator pitch for Installomator, what it will do for our listeners out there, and then I think we'll just get some background in your history with Mann Consulting and technology consulting in general, and then move back into the meat of the discussion about Installomator. So first, what's the elevator pitch for why someone might want to use something like Installomator?
Managing packages without packages, I think, is a key. Keeping packages up to date and installing the most current version of a piece of software when you deploy a new system so that you're not putting it in a state where it needs to be patched the second you deploy it.
This is one of those things where, to my uninformed mind, looking at this just philosophically, wouldn't it be great if this was just built in and just managed by the first party? Sure, you've got the Mac App Store, and that's the equivalent. If you deploy apps only through the Mac App Store, you can use those tools to automatically keep them up to date, and that typically works well. But wouldn't it be nice if there were some standard package management solution built into the Mac OS, say, or a tool from Apple that maybe could be added on, could just update everything. It's just as important almost as updating the Mac OS version. What a great thing to know exists, and let's get into it a little bit further. But first, how long have you been with Mann Consulting?
I have been with Mann Consulting for 13 years now at this point. It's been long enough where I'm starting to forget the actual number.
Wow. That's good. That's a good sign. So how did you get involved originally with Apple Consulting or any other kind of technology consulting?
Like most people, started in education. In my high school, ran the computer lab, got hired by my high school, started managing all of the Macs there at a scale before tools like Jamf were really available. NetBoot images of devices using various Apple provided technologies, and then decided to take it private.
Wow. So you've been packaging and imaging and all since before it was cool, since before you were doing it professionally. That's pretty remarkable to be able to get paid by your high school. I think that was the dream of probably a lot of us out there. I did some work for my middle school way back when, not on a day-to-day basis, but on a project basis. And I'm thinking now, if only they would have paid me in delayed starts for the day, or just like the day could have started at about 9:30 a.m. instead of 6 or 7 a.m. or whatever it was back then. I would have taken that over money, I think, at that point. But anyway, that's a good way to get involved. Where did your interest take you from managing and imaging and things like that? Where did you go from there?
I split off into networking and also the streamlining of device management. At one point, we had a system that we built that pretty much R-synced all the apps from a standard server on a nightly basis. There was another tool called Radman that we played with that did all of this kind of like creating a fake image. Once I went into the more corporate environment, we had the ability to play with a little more money. Stuff like Jamf became viable and part of the budget. And that became a big interest for me, was never creating an image again was my goal in life.
Mhm.
After sealing up an image for hours and then realizing I forgot one thing and
Yeah.
having to go add
Yes.
that thing and reseal it, and then realizing Apple just released an update. It was the worst. I never want to do this again. And so I moved to packages, and we were creating packages, and we were using Deploy Studio and putting packages on these thumb drives. As a consultant, you don't get to set up a server that's always available to you. You have to be a little more nimble. You have what you have and what the client has at the time. So it did become a point where I never wanted to deal with a package again in my life, similar
Mhm.
to images, right? The second I had this package for Chrome, Google just made an update. That became a big interest, was how to automate the process and how to do it not so much vertically, but horizontally, where a lot of people have a single Jamf instance or a single MDM instance with tons of clients. My problem was I had a ton of Jamf instances,
Mhm.
and setting something up one at a time does not scale that way.
Yeah, a packaging workflow is essentially a level of automation. And the way I look at Installomator is adding another layer of automation to that automation. It's like being able to, like you're describing, you're not having to reinvent the wheel each time. I'm still in the honeymoon phase of package management. I feel just having started just a few years ago, building out my own software in Adigy, their smart software workflow is pretty good and reliable and all that. And they have some great tutorials and things. And I look at it as fun to do that, to be able to research where to get the software and how to repackage it, maybe what kinds of install scripts or condition scripts I want and things like that. And it's always really fun to actually invest that time and then be able to just click a button and deploy it and have it work across a fleet of devices. But again, that's the honeymoon phase, because then you go back and, like you said, oh, there's a point one now, so I need to redo that whole thing. Or now I need to roll my own like update solution on top of the kind of base package of, let's say, the Adobe Creative Cloud software. I package it with the latest update, but then there, of course, there are little minor updates along the way. So how can I like also manage those updates? I've now begun looking in this direction. We talked about Electrona Patch recently, and of course now Installomator. Monkey is out there. Would you consider those three to be on equal footing in your experience?
Yeah, and then there's also DataJar's suite of applications as well.
Nice.
Um, that
And you mentioned using Jamf as your primary. Would you
mhm.
say like one of these is better than another in Jamf? I guess you're standardizing on Installomator, so that probably tells us all we need to know about that.
Yeah, we decided with Installomator was our standardization. Electrono wasn't really available at the time, so there wasn't much comparison. For us, Installomator was the horse we bet on, and now we're pretty far down the tracks.
Nice.
Yeah.
I guess to get into it a little bit more, there's the concept of a label. Is that the
Hmm.
terminology to use? And so what does that
Yep.
mean exactly?
So a label is basically a recipe similar to auto package. It's a way to install the application, right? It'll have where do you go download the application from? It'll have information like the name of the application. It will have who the developer is and what their Apple code signing identity is. And it could have some other information like here are the processes that need to quit. And also, do I need to run any custom commands after the installation occurs? And so once that label is created, the Installomator core script will actually process the label and do what's needed to be done in the background. So you don't have to rewrite the download function every time, right?
Hmm.
How does it ingest that data? Is there some kind of workflow where you just enter these four fields or something like that, and then Installomator can take that in, or is it more complicated than that?
So the actual code itself, Installomator is ironically one of those projects that has thousands of lines of code,
Yeah, it freaked
but
me out the
most of
first time I saw it.
it's scary. Most of them are just variables that do absolutely nothing unless
Yeah.
you invoke them. But putting those in there gives a new user the ability to say, I want Zoom, and not have to come up with the download URL or any other bits of information. So there's a pretty big library, and I think Armin had the count last time, but it's hundreds and hundreds of labels that have been created by the community to install various software that they need. And as long as it's A, publicly available on the internet, and B, code signed with the developer certificate, Installomator can effectively install it.
Wow,
So people have been submitting a lot.
that's very cool. So just zooming out a little bit, I would have to deploy Installomator to a particular Mac, let's say. So that means deploying the binary of Installomator. Is that the idea?
So the reason I actually went with Installomator was the simplicity. It is a ZSH script. There is no binary. It actually runs from Jamf as a script. So the code never stays at rest on the system. So if you update your core Installomator code in your Jamf instance, your Chrome policy, your Zoom policy, your Slack policy are all up to date with the latest information instantly. So you have a single place to make the updates occur. For other MDMs, there are options to install the script locally through a package. Yes.
It's fascinating. Yeah, it's fascinating how this just, like I said, it did freak me out at first, but this one massive script, you could just plug it in and say, give me Zoom or give me Office or give me that. And it just does the rest. And at least for me, once you get past the sheer vastness of the script and realize I don't need to know every line of code in here, you start to feel a little bit more at ease into just plugging in the values that you need and just getting the exact apps out of there and watching them seamlessly update. It's pretty amazing.
Wow. That's very cool. Does that also imply there are no dependencies that it has?
There are no dependencies. As a company at Mann, once Apple announced they were moving Python, we immediately moved everything off of Python from our Jamf servers because having a dependency was not an option to then have to manage it. So Installomator fit that really well for us.
Yeah, I had some scripts out there that relied on Python that, of course, when Python went away, their output changed. Oh, unexpected behavior. What's going on? Oh, this Python thing didn't run. We never did any kind of error handling for what happens if this line doesn't run in some of our scripts. Yeah, it's tricky. And the more dependencies in a script or in a binary or whatever, in any kind of open source software that you might have, are not only a challenge potentially for that reason, because some project goes away and now the whole thing falls apart, but also it's a potential security concern for each additional dependency in the stack. In theory, you should really be scrutinizing that code, or someone should be. What's the story with the Good Samaritan effect, where we're all standing around thinking everyone else is looking at the code and making sure it's secure. So I'm not sure if that always gets done. And there've been some stories of one little sort function or one little thing that pads an integer with a zero or something like that a lot of people are using, that they're incorporating into their scripts, ends up being taken over by some nefarious actor. And suddenly this thing at the base of the internet is now, means that nothing is working, or worse, it's compromised. So just the fact that it is one massive script, that makes it easier to deploy and also to trust, as long as you trust a project where it's open source, and therefore a lot of contributors are looking at it, and hopefully people are doing enough of a code review to know that it is trustworthy. But it's that much simpler anyway, even if it's a massive script.
Yeah, it's very human readable too, since they are just terminal commands. You can quickly see what they're doing.
Isaac, are you active in the Installomator Mac Admin Slack channel as well?
I am. A couple of the other people on the team have been fielding a lot of the technical questions more than I have. I will sometimes show up with a label that I forgot to push into the main branch, is a lot of where mine has come in.
I find that community is very good. It was Adam Codego who actually helped me recently with something regarding Google Chrome. And I guess there are a couple different ways you can push out Chrome, and there's a PKG, and then there's the other option. And so I was having a struggle with updating Chrome, and it's just an easy community to go to. And we say this a lot with Mac admins in general. All of the channels are always very welcoming and not judgmental. So it's nice to be able to jump in, and people from the project they workshop it with you and even pull other people in and try and figure out what went wrong. So it's almost like full support for a product that you purchase. The team is there and ready.
Yeah, Adam and Soren both have, and Armin as well, have spent a lot of time answering questions and helping people create new labels and even getting them involved. So it's been quite impressive, actually.
Isaac, would it be safe to say that any MDM solution would work well with Installomator?
Yeah, there are some ways that you have to change the logic if script execution is not directly available to you. Mm-hmm. I know Jamf is unique in the fact that you can just paste a script into a window and run it on computers. You can run a package installer for some that don't support running a script. I've seen some people do some creative things with wrapping it into other things. I actually saw somebody create a payload-free package that just ran Installomator and installed something.
And what would be the best way for someone to get started? Is there a landing page, like a wiki that they could go to? Or would it be joining the specific channel on Mac Admin Slack? Let's say I'm listening to the show and I'm very excited about wanting to try this. Where do I go first?
The Mac Admin Slack is a great place because it has the GitHub URL and the channel name. The GitHub repo is also a great place because it has READMEs. It should have links to Armin's blog, going over some setup methods and strategies. Those are two places you can also get, or one place you can get immediate help from a lot of people in the community too.
Okay. And you mentioned before the show, this is just for my own interest, that initially the way Installomator started out, you're participating in a forked version of that. Could you just tell us a little bit of that, how that happened and what caused that? Yeah.
I had a colleague that we were trying to figure out how to do patch management in Jamf. This was when patch management in Jamf meant create a package, upload it to your Jamf server, and attach it to that version, which put me again into that I never want to create a package again in my life bucket. And we were trying to figure out how to handle this across, I think at the time it was like 40 Jamf instances, and there was a lot of clicking around the GUI. A colleague showed me a beta of Installomator, and I reached out to Armin, and I was really interested in it because of the kind of the flexibility. Our focus at the time was updating, and we had a real big interest in Chrome updates 4 times a month. And if you spread that across 4,000 computers, you now have 4,000 installs a month, and by 12 months, etc. Whereas if you're just doing installs, you're only doing it 4,000 times, and then you're not doing it ever again. So the bulk of our interest was like, how do we update these? So we started putting in a lot of code that basically was going to be hard to support, at least just to public, things like allowing for deferrals. We had some customers that wanted certain things like the notion of a critical update, like, is this Chrome update so important that the user has no choice but to run it? And we started building on that. We also ran into a scenario of, how do I know this is all working across 100 plus Jamf instances without going in and logging into each one and then clicking on each policy? So we started then building in Datadog logging so that we could bring all of the data into a central location, which was really cool because it was super flexible to add in. Some of that we ported back into the main code base. So now we get an alert when an application stops installing at a certain threshold. So like, the Chrome URL is not valid anymore, or the Chrome code signature changes, we start getting Slack alerts to try and now go figure out, is this something we need to worry about from a code perspective or a security perspective? So that fork has been now, I think it's been 3 years that we've been riding in parallel.
So that's really interesting. So it's not this fork has happened recently. That's a pretty good track record with open source software, 36 months. So it seems like it's still proliferating and more people are joining the bandwagons. Good things ahead.
Yeah.
If you don't mind me asking a little bit more about the, I guess, centralized logs. If you have this deployed out to multiple MDMs, are you pointing to a centralized hosted log somewhere else where they can all write back to?
Yeah, in the script, and if you check the Installomator code too, there's a print log function in there that if there is a Datadog source specified, everything that is outputted will get a logging level, info, warn, debug, etc. And anything that is above a certain threshold will get posted to an HTTP endpoint in real time as it happens, as opposed to getting written to a file and then uploaded to the Jamf server at the very end. So we can debug things in real time as they're running. We do have millions and millions of logs, so that's we have to be careful when we do add them. But it's very helpful. We can start to get basic counts of like how many people have updated Chrome in the last week. But our biggest is the error logging there. It's been very helpful.
Can you flag that sort of thing? If something rings as an error, you'll get an alert as opposed to it just writing data to the log. All of a sudden, a flag will be raised and you can look into it basically.
Yeah, we can flag on things that I find immediately critical. Google Chrome failed to download because of a certain reason. And then there's other things where we can set more of a threshold. If we see that there are too many updates of a certain application over a certain period of time, maybe it's incorrectly updating. So we can set more of a, if this happens 1,000 times, send an alert so that we can look at it.
Yeah, I'd say 1,000 is probably a lot.
You'd be shocked at how many updates we currently have going per week. Especially for apps like Zoom and Chrome.
Yeah, I can imagine. Is this a log location something that you pay to host, or do you just have this internally?
We pay Datadog to host it.
It's Datadog is the place. Okay.
Yeah, Datadog is a service. They're like Splunk or other options like that. They provide an HTTP endpoint that you can post to. The reason we went with it was the cost per million logs was less than a coffee. Like $1 for a million logs.
Wow.
So even when we're doing 20, 30, 40 million logs, no one's really analyzing the
That's
cost.
pretty cheap.
Yeah.
It is pretty cheap. And then you can build dashboards on top of those and show pie charts and some pretty interesting kind of data sources of this. Splunk is a little more expensive, and it required, we found at least, a higher learning curve.
Interesting. Zooming out once again, I'm curious if you guys, either of you have, because Isaac, obviously you've been managing this for quite a while at a very large scale, and Sam, you're getting into it. Do either of you have any big wins that got you really into it? So like Isaac, you found this and you reached out to Armin and got into it. What would you say were some of the first big cases that you had some success with on this?
I think some of the big cases were standing up a new Jamf instance for us. We also moved into building the Jamf instance from XML files to an API. And Installomator really helped us create these workflows in one spot and then just like point and shoot at the Jamf instance and just say, you get Chrome, Word, Slack, Zoom, and I want you to patch them.
Wow.
And then being able to just walk away from that and know that it was continuously running.
That's really great. Yeah, to be able to just say that to your clients and offer that and back it up with the fact that you've got this fairly bulletproof solution to do that. It takes the initial setup time. It's like anything where you're automating something, you want to make sure that you're going to get that time back. And certainly with this, once you have success on a solution that's going to be able to be repeatable like that, you're going to save a ton of time in the long term. Be able to offer that, since we all should be offering something like that. So Sam, it sounds like it was pretty easy for you to get into it. Was it first on your radar after it came up for all of us, where we thought of inviting Armin on the show to talk about it? When did you get into it, and what was some of your successes?
I think it's funny that you said it was easy. So I'll tell you the quick story about this is that I literally was intimidated by the size of the script. I was just like, I don't know, this is going to take a lot of time. I'm not going to figure this out. So I just kept talking about it with people and saying, everyone that used it was like, oh, dude, it's awesome. I'm like, yeah, it looks awesome. I just don't know where to start. So long story short is I had a class with Soren Thielgaard, who's also a big contributor to Installomator. He's in there every day doing stuff. And as was mentioned, he's in the Slack channel. This dude's pretty smart. Hey, Soren, would you mind working with me on an MDM and seeing how we can get Installomator started? So I actually worked with him. And he got me all started with one instance, and we got it rocking and rolling where new installs were deploying, updates were happening, and Swift dialogue messages were showing up to users, and it looked super great and professional. And then I was just able to replicate that because he did all the heavy lifting. I didn't roll up my sleeves too much at the beginning, I'll be honest. I cheated, and I got someone that knew what they were doing. And that was a huge help to get me going.
Nice.
Can either one talk about that just a little bit, what those Swift dialogues look like to the user?
It's just a way of like alerting the users that something is coming, something is happening, something is complete, so that they're aware each step of the way that something needs to happen, whether it be that they have to quit the app to get it done or that it's urgent and something has to be completed. It gives them a very integrated feeling, like it's coming from the operating system.
And are you able to personalize that? So put your HCS logo on that. So how does that work if you have, let's say, an MDM solution that has multiple tenants? How do you put in, I guess you'd have to create separate scripts.
In your case, Jerry, if you wanted to brand it for you, it would probably be easier because then the script is the same. I like to usually brand it with the company, just so they see it coming from them. And then it's more of a pain. So like you said, it would have to be adjusted per client.
Usually we do the adjustments inside of the policy so that, and this is, again, speaking to Jamf, and would be the scenario, but the policy has a lot of the variables for how it looks, how it feels. And that way, when I upload the script, there's no modifications ever. Everyone has the same script. Changes come from elsewhere.
You guys certainly
Quick,
know what you're talking about when it comes to this stuff. I'll tell you that much.
I'm obsessed with patching.
Nice.
It's become a weird, I don't know, fixation. We've actually started coming to the point now. We're now going to the Jamf instance and pulling all the applications and then pulling all the patch data and bringing them into Google Sheets and then starting to match the data with other sources so that we have more information. For example, 40% of Chrome is up to date. But when was the last Chrome update? Oh, 4 days ago. That's good.
Yeah.
We kept having these issues where CISOs would go look at the Jamf dashboard and say, Chrome's not up to date. And then everybody panics for a while and realizes 20% of the computers are offline for 6 months and Chrome updated yesterday.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm just beginning to dabble in a little bit of that data. So far for me, it's not scraping logs across the fleet like you have, but just looking at MDM software updates and my new workflow on that I posted about on our commandcontrolpower.com site and talked about a little bit in Slack, but just getting into leveraging MDM updates and looking at how, as we record, 13.6.4 just came out, and I have my certain Macs just in a test policy patching like on Tuesday nights and Wednesday nights. And by the time I checked it, an hour or two after the window opened to patch those machines, at one client who's a test, 3 out of 4 had updated automatically before I even looked at it. And at another client, 8 out of 16 had updated just in that first hour or two after that initial window. So it's amazing. Right after an update comes out, I had set all of this up when there wasn't really an update. I had tested it in cases where there were updates, but then I deployed it in cases where the updates, everything was already up to date. And then so to see an update actually come out in practice and then to see the results of our patching solution, or at least software update solution, was pretty great to be able to look back at that and say, wow, that's a pretty good track record. In just a couple of hours, in one case it's 75% complete. In other case, it's 50% complete. It's nice to be able to see that and just sit back and watch your handiwork work out.
It'd be nice if Apple gave a little more in the area. That's the one thing I find missing the most, is especially with the App Store and software update for the last 3 years of my life, which has been, I don't know if you've all probably dealt with it, not working half the time, but App Store is so hit or miss. You can't enforce updates. It's got the same feature set that it had when it came out. I was really excited about it. I thought it was the future of app deployment until I realized that it won't run the VPP update if the app is open. And if you quit the app, you have no way to go and have the user actually run the update.
Yes. It's so annoying.
So annoying. User doesn't know that they have an update. They can't go to the App Store and run the update manually. They just have to quit the app and go for a walk. Hope that it happens.
Hope for the best. Jump, stand on one foot. We're back to that kind of method of troubleshooting. Our slogan for the show is, "Have you tried restarting?" Certainly you could try that. It's also, have you tried praying? Maybe that's going to work. Yeah, it's just a black box, right? In a lot of cases like that.
Yeah. So it would be nice if there was a little more there from the MDM perspective, especially like the MDM spec from Apple of, if an update comes out, force the user to quit the app and run it after X number of days. Yeah,
there's just a few little settings like that would be helpful. And the way that they would implement that, I imagine, would be either a command with some kind of variant of that command or just several different commands, like the force update versus prompting the user. You could have the same, just another layer to that kind of structure. But now, does that change with DDM? Because now, of course, declarative device management is, I think, a little bit more reliable at insisting on updating at least a Mac OS version. Should we be asking for this now to be included with DDM, right? Because that's like a new spec.
Yeah, I feel like they nailed it with DDM, at least with reliability. I've done testing, and our biggest complaint was it was too reliable. None of the dialogues actually say that the update's going to restart, and then it does in the middle of a meeting or whatever. But it's a step in the right direction, and it'd be nice if app downloads and installs could be there. And if there could be some logic, some more persistent logic, I think. Having to say, I want all my computers to update to 14.3 by this date is a step that you have to take every release, as opposed to every time Apple releases an update, people need to install it within 14 days. And that could go the same for apps, right? We're heavily into automation. I don't want to have to think about when updates occur. They happen all the time.
I agree that the whole thing about your App Store comment is actually what started the Installomator piece for me, was because we had a customer, they had very specific needs. Slack had to be updated every week. It couldn't be more than 7 days behind and all this other stuff. And I'm like, I can't really help that. I'm with an app store version of an app. So for any of the apps that had alternative means like Microsoft Office, Slack, that's the way I went. And that's why Installomator came in, and that solved my whole issue. Otherwise, I was going to go in there manually all the time.
Yeah, and I don't know if you watched Lost, but the guy in the bunker who had to push the button every 12 hours, but he didn't know why he was doing it.
I never saw the show, but
no, I didn't see that either.
That's how I felt like eventually with uploading new packages to Jamf's patch management.
Wow.
Like,
great, now I have to watch Lost.
Yeah, don't worry. It's 900 episodes in. You'll get to that part.
It sounds like a worthy investment of time.
Yeah. Then I'll be like, I get it.
Yeah, exactly.
Go ahead and send me a message when you find out.
Yeah.
Right. No, that's great. I love hearing about a need being met by open source software. And I'm always also tempted to want these MDM vendors to, it's why doesn't Apple just buy so-and-so? Like, why doesn't Adigy just buy Installomator? Well, it's not for sale, for one. It's open source. Maybe there's a price. But I'm curious about, I know that in the past, some of them have included Monkey. I don't know if that's like a licensing question. The spirit of open source, a lot of people have invested a lot of time. I guess the idea is to keep it free and open source. But it's also, am I wrong to desire for Adigy just to say, now with Installomator, click a checkbox, and then now I can just literally just write a script that says Installomator Zoom install, or I forget what the sort of like syntax is, but making it just that much easier than trying to deploy like Swift dialog and all that kind of stuff. Do you think there's anything on the horizon for something like that?
I keep waiting for it. I feel like the Jamf app installers are moving in the direction. I know Adigy has the app catalog. I feel like MDM kind of serves like three basic tenets. You keep this operating system up to date. It's one. Keep the apps patched. It's two. And put a baseline security there. And the fact that number one and number two typically are not just sitting there in front of you waiting to go is a missed opportunity a lot of times.
Right.
Armin works for Jamf now. They didn't buy Installomator, but he's on their team now. I think a lot of vendors have been doing a lot of good work towards making this a built-in function as opposed to a scour GitHub and pick which flavor of how to do this works best for you.
Right. Yeah, because it's very much like a key feature that I think a lot of them would like to offer. And obviously it's also its own thing. As much as an MDM vendor deals with all of those aspects of managing devices and the MDM protocols in general, this kind of feature of being able to update everything else is clearly an important aspect, but also one that clearly takes a lot of time by someone's time to manage it. So it's almost like another full-time project. And it's great that we have these options. Now we've heard about Installomator. We recently talked about Electrona Patch. And then also, of course, Monkey is out there. And then Auto Package. Would those be like the four that listeners should be considering when you're talking about scouring GitHub?
Yeah. For open source and free, I think Electrona is also paid.
It's paid, yes.
It's paid, yes. So I'd say those ones, and again, I don't know what Jamf's plans with the data jar acquisition are, but they also had a pretty robust configuration for just automatically patching apps. Those are the ones that we keep running into and keep evaluating ourselves against, at least internally.
Nice. This has been really informative to hear all about Installomator and how you're running it for a number of different clients. And we should be encourage listeners to check out the Installomator channel on the Mac Admin Slack. I think it sounds like that would be the best way to look for some support and help.
I think most people will be able to find that the easiest.
Yeah,
come in and say hi. Everyone's fairly friendly.
Awesome.
Oh, fairly. Okay, we'll have to talk about that another day.
You don't want it to be too friendly. You want it to a bit of an edge is good.
Exactly.
That's good. Listeners, test the waters there of the Installomator channel on the Mac Admin Slack. See if you can provoke any kind of unfriendly response. That would be my wish for all of you. No, I'm just joking. But yeah, you'll find Isaac there, and I'm sure you'll find Armin there as well, and lots of other people using and supporting Installomator.
If you would rather just let somebody else handle patching and call it a day, it is something we do.
That's fantastic. So in addition to listeners trying to investigate and test and try and adjust and maybe ask for some support about using this new tool, you offer this as is it a service as a solution? What's the term for this? But
yeah, so it varies on levels, but we include a lot of the workflows into the Jamf instance when the Jamf instance is MSP'd through us. So it's a value add that we'll add on top of a Jamf Cloud instance. And that'll include just getting it into your instance, patching it, and then reporting that the patching is actually working, amongst other things.
That's great. Yeah, that's exactly what I would want. So that's great. So for anybody out there using Jamf, definitely consider that option from Isaac. Find Isaac on the Mac Admins Slack in the Installomator channel. And
Mann.com is also somewhere people can go to get more information.
Excellent. And that's a 4-letter domain. That's pretty impressive.
I know, right? It helps when you've been in technology for 30 some odd years and your last name is Mann.
Yeah.
We also own Class C that I found out the other day of IP addresses.
Wow, that's wild.
I know. We're running out of those. What are we doing with that?
You're holding out long enough for there to be even more of a premium. So
exactly.
Maybe Verizon reaches out to you at some point and you get cell phone company money for those. So.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sweet.
Thank you very much, Isaac Ordonez, Director of Technology at Mann Consulting, for introducing us to Installomator.
Thank you.
Special thanks to the following community members whose strong monthly support has sustained us for all these years. Ryan Gowdy, CoreCompetent.com, Weldon Dodd, Kanji.io, Richard Wingfield, EnvisionDesign.net, Adam Rice, AskAdam.io, Mac Admins Podcast, podcast.macadmins.org, Tim Nyberg, TheMacGuys.com, Michael Thompson, Origin84.com, Matthew Waples, Waples.net, Tom Puls, BoxIT.tech, Jerome Potters, PITPro.nl, Steve Sorbo, MacSOS.biz, Andy Espo, CallAndy.com, and Nate Sinal, WeAreAScout.com. Thank you all very much, and thanks to our patrons at every level of support. If you enjoy the show, we really would love your support. And if you already support us and can increase your monthly pledge, we really do find that encouraging. CommandControlPower.com and click support. Thanks very much for listening and for supporting the show.
Jerry does his voices of customers of all kinds.
Am I on the cloud?
Joe spins his deeply detailed yarns all the time.
I have a whole story about this.
Sam is on the road again, phoning in from a hotel.
At least we know where